Hello and thanks for joining us on Relational Practice Social Work Podcast. I'm Dr. Jodie.
I'm Rose Mackey, and we're both private practice social workers who work in the fields of child protection, out-of-home care and trauma. We are based in New South Wales, Australia, and today we're recording this episode on Yuin country.
That's right, we are. Okay. As always, we'd love you to follow our podcast and connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, and via our new YouTube page. We will be adding content and videos to all the platforms regularly.
Sorry. Cash and Ollie are both here, and Cash is very excited.
So there will be some dog interruptions, no doubt.
As always, please send us any practice stories, questions or comments to relationalpractice01@gmail.com.
If you could actually go and subscribe and rate and review us, that would be very much appreciated. It just helps with our algorithm, I think. Is that what it helps with?
Yeah,
it helps
so
with our rankings. Yeah. Okay. All right, cool. So today we're actually doing our Q&A session.
Yeah,
Are you
thank
excited?
you. I don't know. I haven't really had time to look at the questions and think about what I'm going to say, so it's going to be completely off the cuff for both of us.
Absolutely. I mean, it usually is so, but yes, we do try and do some planning normally, but we haven't done any planning today because we've been busy doing business stuff.
So thank you to all of you who sent some questions into our Gmail account. We've picked about 4 or 5 that we think we are going to attempt to answer, I guess.
Yeah. And we tried to pick the questions that would most be interesting for people to listen to, because otherwise, it would be very boring.
Very boring.
Yeah.
And if your question isn't answered, we're sorry, but we'll keep them and we might do a Q&A later on as well. So
Yeah, but if your question wasn't answered and you'd still like us to answer it, please just send us another email and go, hey, can you let us know? Can you answer that email? And we can answer via email.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, we can definitely do that. All right, you ready?
Yeah.
Okay. So the way we're going to do this is we thought we would look at the same questions, but we might not both answer the one question.
Yeah, we'll just see how it flows.
Yeah.
So the first question I'm going to ask you, Jodie, this was a great question. What's the biggest misconception people, including other professionals, have about what a social worker actually does?
That's a great question, Rose. It's kind of a big question too. And I think when I thought about this question earlier, I didn't really want to talk about social worker, but I wanted to talk about counselling.
Okay.
Do you think that's appropriate?
Well, is counselling something you do as part of your social work duties?
Yeah. And the reason I thought about it was because I think there are a lot of misconceptions as to the role of counselling in terms of promoting stability, particularly for children.
Can't wait to see where you go with this.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Do you think I'm going to be skating on thin ice?
No. I am genuinely curious if what I'm thinking is what you're going to say.
I bet it is the same. All right. I think that I think people have some very interesting ideas around what counselling will achieve, generally, but particularly for children who've experienced trauma. Say for children who might be in out-of-home care or might be had involvement with child protection, there is this view that if you send a child off to see a counsellor, then everything will be fixed. And if it's not getting fixed and it's not getting fixed quickly, well, then obviously there's an issue with the counselling or the counsellor or something else. Where in reality, therapy is a very long process, and therapy should be a long process. And not every child needs counselling who may have experienced abuse and neglect, because truly the environment actually is going to do much more in the early days, I think, of trying to stabilise someone. The environment is going to do much more than what counselling ever could. What do you think?
I agree. And I have been guilty years gone by of thinking, oh, there's so much happening for this child. I don't know what to do. Let's send them to counselling and it'll be nice and neatly packaged and fixed. I've thought that I can say that. In my early years of practice, definitely had that misconception. Now I view counselling as part of the wider jigsaw.
Yes.
So recovery from trauma for me is really multifaceted.
Yeah.
And counselling for some people who have experienced trauma and whose trauma is pervasive and persistent, counselling is a really good option for some of those people, but it is not the only thing. And it's also not a ticker box. Well, I sent you to 10 counselling sessions. Why are we still having these behavioural adaptations? Why are we still, acting out or whatever it may be? And I think it's because counselling alone can't fix anything.
No.
And if you think about, we're not fixing things, it's a journey to recovery.
And I like your visual of it being part of the jigsaw, because it's an important part of the jigsaw. But yeah, it on its own, without there being any change in the home environment or any change in, the other areas that this person may kind of enter in and through, then it's really going to do nothing. Really.
Are you talking about just for children or for anyone?
That's a good question. I think I'm talking just for children, but I wonder if it can apply for everyone.
See, I would think if you think about the context an individual lives in and thinking about an adult, initially counselling may be the platform an adult may need to think about what needs to change in their environment.
Yeah.
To then either feel like through a strengths-based perspective or a little bit of different resourcing, they can make some changes. I definitely agree for a child or a young person, counselling alone isn't effective if the placement or the environment, their home life, there's no changes there. But for an adult, I wonder if it could be the start of maybe that pre-contemplation stage, because as an adult, you have more autonomy and the ability to make different decisions than children and young people do.
I agree, but I think you also said that without change, though, without change, then what can actually be achieved long term? We're talking about long term.
I agree. I think, though, it could be the platform for change for adults, but if that doesn't occur, I do think you're right.
And I think it can be the platform for change for children and adolescents as well, but there has to be so much more scaffolding of support, emotional support in particular.
Yes.
For the child to be in a place where they can actually contemplate change, particularly if they are hanging on to a really entrenched narrative that is not something that might be true for them. Then all therapy is going to do is put pressure on that narrative, which is therefore just going to close that kid down. Yeah, it's like it's my little bugbear. Like, I find it. I mean, we do, don't we? We do a lot of therapy, and I really value therapy as an intervention tool. Obviously, otherwise I wouldn't do it. But I feel like people need to have realistic expectations of therapy and really understand how hard it is for particularly children who have been so used to inhibiting emotions or inhibiting the truth about what might be happening at home.
Yes.
You're suddenly going in, asking them to open everything up to this stranger, and then wonder why, one, they either don't want to go, or two, it's not actually affecting any change, because it has to be a long-term process built on trust and, I guess, mutual respect.
So I was just going to say that. I think some professionals don't understand how long the relationship building phase can take, especially for children that inhibit their emotions, wear a mask in public, and relationships are scary. So if they've got a particularly negative internal working model, that process of establishing rapport, building trust, commencing a relationship with a professional is really scary. And I don't think it's like 2 sessions and we can say we're done.
No, because I think sometimes that will take 10 sessions.
Yes.
I'm also not a supporter of people, children, adults, young people, whoever, just being in therapy forever without any end date. I think there always needs to be an end date. And whether that's about there being 10 sessions and then you have a rest. And this is what I've called it for some children. We have a break, and we have a break for, I don't know, the remainder of the school term, or we have a break for the remainder of the year and we come back next year. Because there needs to be time where they're not actually in active therapy, where they can enact the skills and the strategies that you're teaching as part of that therapy.
And also, if you think about the other pieces of the jigsaw, you don't want to create a place where you're creating an over-reliance on therapy either.
No, that's right.
You want them to use their relationships, their social connections, their lighthouses, whoever it is in their context, in their world, and learn from them as well, and feel a little bit normal, dare I say that word, and not just be in therapy forever, because there might be an out-of-home care, or there might be some real challenges at home.
Yeah.
It's not their whole identity.
No, and it can't be, but it's so easy for it to become the most important part of a person's identity. And all that does is just send a message that there must be something absolutely wrong with me.
Reinforces, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's God, you got me on a date, didn't you? It's because I've been thinking about this, and I've had some recent conversations, and I was just kind of like, there's a lot of misconceptions about therapy, and I know there always has been, but it's just today it's really annoying me.
Wow. What a good question.
What a good question. Thank you, listener, for your question.
I like it. I'm just going to add very quickly, the biggest misconception I think that people have about social workers is that we all do the same thing.
Yeah, that's true.
And that if you're a social worker, you have expertise in disability, drug and alcohol, domestic and family violence, whatever, domain of practice it may be. And that is just absolutely not, in my experience, correct.
No, that's really true. Oh, the other misconception I think about social workers is that we're kind of bleeding heart, nice people all of the time.
That, or we're on a protest picket line.
That's true.
Every weekend with our placards.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. That I think is huge. People just automatically think, oh, you must be a nice person. When people say to you, oh, I don't know how you do that job.
Yeah, actually, that's true.
Do you know what I mean? I don't know how some people do their jobs, but I don't think that everyone's the same in their profession either.
Yeah. Well, no humans are homogenous.
No, that's true. All right, cool. All right, what's the next question, Rose?
The next question.
I think our papers are mixed up. I think I've got yours and you've got mine.
What's going on?
Yeah, we'll swap.
Whoop, as I've just got yours all out of whack.
Okay. All right, next question.
Oh, what about supervision?
All right, I am going to ask this one to you. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
What makes for truly effective supervision, and what's the one question you think all supervisees should be asking?
So truly effective supervision, I think you have to have trust, like absolute trust in your supervisor.
Yep.
Supervisor actually has to know what they're doing. Actually has to know I would say, not necessarily your field of practice, but enough about your field of practice.
Okay.
To know, how to ask the right types of questions, but that actually, I think, have to be a social worker.
Yeah.
And they actually need to be able to be comfortable with not being liked and not having every session feel like it was a comfortable conversation.
Right. Because you've talked about that before. You've talked about before how on this podcast about how some of the best supervision you've ever received has felt uncomfortable and you've been really challenged. But you've learned so much from that.
I don't think every supervision session you have to feel uncomfortable, nor do you have to feel uncomfortable for the whole time. But I think about one particular supervisor I had who was a social worker who did know the field of practice I was practicing in. And she just kept telling me how everything was so good and yes, great. It felt good, but I actually didn't learn anything. I didn't extend my practice. I didn't have it didn't spark me to have to go and get, different knowledge or to try new tools or implement, new frameworks in my practice. I just stayed comfortable in I'm doing an okay job. I always left feeling good though. It was then later I was like, hang on, she's not actually challenging me. She's not, she's never saying to me, asking curious questions around what else could you have done? Or is there another way you could have got the same outcome? I love that question because it took me a long time as a human, but also as a social worker, to actually understand that saying that there's more than one way to climb a mountain. It took me a long time to realize what they were actually trying to tell me about that.
Yeah, okay.
And I think part of having a question like, is there another way you could have practiced as a social worker to get the same or a similar outcome that might have felt nicer for the clients or might have been a different journey for clients? I think that is a really good question because it's always challenged me to think, just because I've done this habitual practice and the outcome was still okay, doesn't mean that there's not another way to do it either.
Can I go back to your comment about they need to know a little bit about the field of practice? Because when you were talking about that, I was thinking about the difference between someone who has content knowledge of the field versus someone who just has really good generic reflective practice skills, and whether you would still get the same level of supervision if you were with someone who didn't really know a lot about the field of practice but had great reflective skills.
I guess I can't speak from personal experience, so that makes it a bit tricky.
Yeah.
But I am probably thinking, now you've phrased it in that way, if you were a very skilled practitioner, and see, I wouldn't say I am in that way. So if someone came to me and said, I'm a palliative care social worker and I want supervision, I'd be like, no, I'm not the right person for you. And I understand grief and loss and, lifespan development and stages and ages of development, but I don't think I could provide quality supervision to someone that worked in palliative care because I've never worked there and I don't actually understand what that is like.
I mean, I do wonder if you're selling yourself short a little bit.
No.
Because you're actually quite reflective. And I wonder if having content knowledge means that you as the supervisor feels more comfortable. So therefore you go into that supervisory session feeling more confident, which I think that I probably, that happens to me. If it's a field of practice I know about, I definitely feel more comfortable and confident.
Yeah.
But if it's not something that I know a great deal about, I think I'm still okay. But I wonder if it's great supervision. I don't know.
Well, do they keep coming back, those people that you supervise that are in fields of practice that you don't have in-depth knowledge about?
Yeah, they do. But I think I need to be thinking about how good I am at facilitating reflective conversation. I mean, I feel like it must be okay because they are coming back.
Well, you are very good at facilitating reflective conversation. I wonder if it's a bit like counselling, a bit of a jigsaw. So you can't, in that instance, maybe you don't get everything from the one. So you might have an on-site supervisor that your place of employment, your direct line supervisor or whatever it may be. But if you're seeking external supervision, maybe then it's a matter of, it's not as important then if you've got a direct line supervisor and you go and seek external supervision.
So it could be around the purpose of the supervision. So which makes more sense in terms of your views around kind of really needing to have that content, because if the purpose of supervision was also around doing some kind of case review or exploration of a case, then content knowledge would be really important.
Yes.
But if it was less about that and more about, doing that reflection stuff and that kind of that linking supervision to kind of knowledge attainment and skill exploration, it would maybe be less important. Both of those things you're very good at. I just think maybe you're selling yourself short. I mean, let's tell everyone who's listening to this isn't the first time we've had this conversation about Rose selling herself short.
Let's just move on from that. Let me ask you, what's one question you think all supervisees should ask their supervisor?
I think, particularly if it's a new arrangement, and again, this might be a bit different if it's like a line management supervision or supervisory relationship. But if it's, say, an external relationship, then the supervisee should definitely be asking about their experience. Don't you think?
Yeah, I think in both instances, setting up any new supervision.
Yeah, but it would be a bit tricky to walk in, like you're walking into your new manager who thinks they're like, eating a bit, and you're going, excuse me, what is your experience? Like, I think that would take a pretty tough supervisee to do that.
But I think we all should be doing it.
Yeah.
You're going to know quickly anyway if they're,
oh, yeah,
those type of people that can talk the talk.
I mean, I probably wouldn't have done that, walked in and said, I would be interested and curious, and I probably would have tried to find out in a different way.
And really, I think people like talking about their experiences in social work. And I think most people, depending on the tone and the pitch and how you've asked the question, would be happy to talk about their experience. Because isn't it part of our values, like honesty and transparency?
But I think we both could name people who would not take that conversation well. Because I think a lot of people get into particularly management roles to meet their own needs and maybe a challenge to those needs. If someone walks in and says, what's your experience, they might see that as a challenge.
That's true.
They might not. It really depends on the person. But what other questions do you think they should be asking?
I'm curious. What questions do you provide lots of supervision? Is there a common question you ask the people you're supervising regularly or generally, whether it's at the beginning stages or more the middle stages? That's a good question to elicit really deep reflection.
Gosh, I don't know. I mean, I'm constantly asking, did that make sense? Because, I talk in circles in my head.
And everyone goes, yes, yes.
I'm constantly, and I think, shit, it didn't make sense to me. So I'm constantly saying, did that actually make sense? Because it didn't feel like it did for me. I don't know if there's a particular question that I would ask all the time, although that might be something that I could ask the people I supervise, because there must be.
I reckon there would be.
There would have to be, wouldn't there? And I just haven't really taken note of it, perhaps. Because I do supervise a lot of people.
I always like to start supervision sessions, if I'm supervising someone, with an appreciative inquiry question. So what's one thing you're most proud of in your last month's work?
Oh, yeah.
Or
you're so much better at it than me.
I'm not. That's how I like to start sessions. I like to start on the strengths base. What are you most proud of in your work since I last saw you?
What's going to happen? All the people I supervise are going to go, listen, Jodie, is Rose free?
They're not, trust me.
I'm going to say, well, you're going to have to ask her about that.
But you need to think about or ask if there's a common question you ask.
Oh, there must be. All those people, whoever you are that is listening, and I know some of you listening, tell me if there's a common question I ask all the time. Tell me, because I'd be very keen to know.
Love it.
All right. Are we ready for next question? I reckon this is a hard one. You ready?
Oh.
This is a really tricky one. Okay, Rose. How do you manage the personal impact of a decision that was ethically sound but had a negative or painful outcome for a client?
Such a massive question.
Yeah.
My brain instantly went to parents when their child or children have been removed.
Yep.
And clearly wasn't in the best interests of their children to remain in their household at that time. But that obviously is a massively devastating consequence for parents. And then I also think about my work with clients who have a brain injury and some of the impacts of their brain injuries, is around their executive functioning and their ability to participate in decision making for themselves. And when in New South Wales, we can have assessments done and suggest to a government body that this person's decision-making abilities need to be removed from them and formally, transferred or allocated to a government body or another person. And I think that's where the other part of my brain went when you asked this question, both maybe ethically sound decisions, but the impact on the individuals in both those situations can be absolutely devastating.
For sure. Yeah.
And as a social worker in both practice settings, you're still required, and we absolutely want to still work with clients. And so you've already got this relationship. There's been a decision made that, is devastating for them, takes away their autonomy or something like their parenting role. As it's hard enough to be a social worker and to maintain and repair that relationship and hang in, but then walking alongside your clients, personally, I find it really hard if you've been a decision maker or an advocate for that decision to be made.
Yeah.
So how do I manage that? I manage that through supervision, probably annoying you throughout the years, and going back to what is the purpose of my role. So in child protection, the purpose of my role is to ensure that children were safe and had parents that were actually parenting in a good enough manner that didn't inflict harm.
Yeah.
And in relation to brain injury, I look at the context of that person's life and try and talk to myself or remind myself what would happen if these decisions weren't made and what would it look like in a month's time, 6 months' time, a year's time, if this person still had, say, financial decision-making responsibility for themselves. And no one can tell the future, but I always go back to, on a balance of probabilities, what would this person's life look like if I didn't suggest, support or advocate for this decision?
I think that's a really sound way of looking at it. That kind of on a balance probabilities, what would this person's life look like?
Yeah.
Because it's really hard, isn't it? Because I guess we, part of our values, our core beliefs as a profession is to do no harm. And it's really hard when you feel like you have done harm, but you've done it because, you've had to, because you've got this ethical dilemma in terms of making sure that duty of care was also being met. We're also taught to kind of promote empowerment at all costs, aren't we?
We are.
And that's hard too.
Really hard when you're saying to someone, look, I don't think you've got the ability to control your finances anymore.
Yeah.
So we're going to suggest the government does that for you.
Yeah.
That just doesn't sit in any textbook or any university course where they tell you how to manage that, because it is about empowering. And how do you say that, come to that decision, and then still try and work with that client?
I think that when I first saw that question, the story that came to mind for me was always this one little girl that I worked with. I don't know if I've talked about this before. And she was removed and she was in foster care, and then going to tell her that long-term orders were made and she was not going home to her mum, and just the devastation that caused. And I will always picture that little girl when I think about questions like that, because ethically, she had to be removed. She wasn't safe. And so there was a duty of care for her to be safe. But, emotionally, she just wanted to be at home.
So how did you manage that?
I guess, do you mean in terms of how I managed that with her?
No, how did you manage that internal debate, struggle, challenge, whatever word you want to call it?
I mean,
honestly, how did you walk away from her?
Really hard. It was really hard, because you also want to say something to make it better. And sometimes there's nothing you can say to make something better. And that's actually a lesson that has taken me a long time to learn, that you as a social worker, your job sometimes is not to make things better, because you actually can't, which I think goes back to ambiguous loss stuff.
Yes.
Your job instead is to, promote knowledge, or to, just kind of be that caring person, just kind of sitting there waiting for the right time to re-engage. for someone if they're distressed.
Yeah. I struggle around that too. Those long moments of, there is nothing I can say to make this better.
No.
And you can sit and you can witness and you can validate and you can reflect back, but you actually can't do or say anything that's going to change the situation. And it's can be very heavy at times.
It's really heavy. And I think knowing that sometimes the best thing to do is to be quiet and to be silent and just to kind of sit there, it takes a lot to learn. When you always think your role is to try and fix something in some way.
Yes. Find a way to navigate the system, find a solution, find a referral pathway, find something that's going to make it better, different, easier to carry. And there are times as a social worker where none of those options are practically available.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. It kind of goes hand in hand with understanding that you might not be the best person to have an ongoing role in this person's life.
Yeah, depending on what it is that you've...
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so for that girl, I was not the best person to have an ongoing role in her life. And that was also hard, letting her go.
I bet, because you'd probably done a lot of assessments and interventions with her. Case management's not a quick, field of practice. And then you've come to the end of a court matter. So obviously time intensive, emotionally labouring as well, the work. And then you have to hand her over to another person because you're not the best person.
No, and you just want to be involved to make sure that she's okay.
And do they know everything? And are they going to understand? And have they read it? And do they get it? And are they going to go the extra mile for her? And
that's right. There's been a few kids where I've had those thoughts about, but this one particular girl, I think is where I always go back to when I think about this very question around doing the thing that you need to do to make sure this kid is safe, even when it's the thing that's going to hurt this kid the most.
Yeah, it's very difficult. And I think at different times of my lifespan, I've dealt with it differently. But I think absolutely knowing what is my role and then thinking future on that balance of probabilities, what's it going to look like if we... Because in a lot of cases, it's easier and nicer not to make those big decisions.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, which I think, I think it helps when there is a shared process of decision-making, but there isn't always that luxury either.
No.
And sometimes it just kind of sits with you and you have to be able to, make the best ethically sound decision you can, given the context. That's a bit of a downer, that question.
No, it's very low. Great question, but
why do we feel so low?
Because we've been transported back to all those times of, there are some children or clients whose stories, faces, and the work you've done with them really, really sticks with you long after it's over.
Yeah, very true. Very, very true. All right.
I'm going to ask you this question. It's about participation of children.
I knew you were going to ask me this
because I think we have talked about this generally over the years.
Yeah.
And it's probably my bugbear. Yours was maybe the counselling fixes everything. So I'm going to ask you about children under the age of 12. And I'm making that distinction because in New South Wales, children under the age of 12, whilst they have every right to participate in decisions about their lives, especially in the care and protection legislation, they don't get to directly instruct a solicitor in children's court proceedings. And for some reason, in my mind, 12 is, an age where I personally put more weight on a child's voice than maybe a 6-year-old. And I don't know why. And then I think about in New South Wales, if you're 14, you can go to a doctor yourself, have your own Medicare card and do all that. So without going too deep into my bank, I'm saying under 12. Yep. What strategies do you employ to ensure a child has a meaningful voice and is actively involved in decisions about them?
This is a bit of a sideline, but still relevant. When I worked for an out-of-home care organisation, I actually developed this whole practice tool that was about this, was about
Did
actually.
you?
Yeah, but you
How
know,
have I never known this?
because I didn't keep it when I left. I thought I did, and I did not keep it. It was very
I
annoying.
could punch you in the nose
I could
right
punch
now.
myself in the nose as well. But and over and over, I thought that many times over the years. But it was kind of like a tool that sat alongside a carer review. And so because a carer review in terms of reviewing a foster care arrangement really focuses on the carer and doesn't really focus on the child. So I developed this tool of capturing the child's voice that sat alongside the carer review process so that their voice could be fed into the review process in a meaningful way. Yeah, I wish I'd kept it.
Me too.
Yeah. And I think the purpose of that was because I was sick of all of these carer reviews coming back with all of these glowing statements about how wonderful this care is, and nobody actually ever sat down and asked the child their opinion of the placement. And I think, because I know we're talking about children under 12, I think that in itself, you can't actually just sit down and say to a kid, tell me what it's like living here. Do you know what I mean?
But people do. I've probably done it.
I know I've done it, but when you look back, you shouldn't do that, because what pressure that puts on a kid.
Yeah.
It's really hard for them to say, unless things are really bad and they've decided I need out of here for my own safety. And how bad must things get if you're in out-of-home care and you have to enact your own safety?
Yeah.
But otherwise, you're always going to get a kid who says, it's fine, it's great. Because what's the alternative for them?
Well,
Do you know what I mean?
and let's say the alternative is I need to share what's happening. Who is?
Yeah.
And what? As part of a care review process?
Yeah. That's right. You're not going to. You're not going to get an honest answer unless things have really got to that point, like I said before, where this kid knows if they don't get out, they're actually not going to survive. And then they will tell somebody. But getting to that point means a lot of stuff's happened.
True.
Yeah. So I guess when you asked me this question, I instantly thought of that tool and wished again that I had kept it, because it was this tool that was focused. But again, it's like everything else. It was focused on relationship building. And so, but intentional relationship building, so that you could actually start to explore what the placement actually felt and, felt like, but also the experience of that placement for this kid. So you didn't have to rely so much on verbal questions.
Okay.
It was kind of a mixture of verbal questions plus also this kind of activities that you would do together.
Does that organisation still use this framework?
They probably never used it, because I developed it, and then I can still see the faces of the people when I presented it. People in senior positions who looked at me as if to say, "You are joking, aren't you? How much time is that going to take?"
Oh, so it wasn't well received. Here I was thinking they thought we're off to
It was never.
we're off to market with our trademark framework. Thanks for
way.
coming.
No, because it's a bit like everything. If it's going to take a bit longer, then it's not going to happen. People aren't going to do it. And two, you have to understand why the process needs to change before you agree to it to being changed. And I don't think people understood that there was an issue with the care review process as it was. I mean, listen, I'm just going to say this, and I'm just going to say it. I was going to say, well, people be listening who might know what I'm talking about, but I'm just going to say it. Like, I remember reading a care review, and the focus of the care review was on how these children who are homeschooled, lived in a rural property, had absolutely no outside connections, no birth family contact, nothing. The focus of the care review was on how they greeted the assessor, who was an internal person for the organisation, at the gate, and they were really smiley and happy to see her, and then how they had made her cookies. That was the focus of a care review. There was some other stuff in there, but mainly because they looked happy at the gate, they'd all worked together to make cookies. In her analysis, the placement was amazing. 6 months later,
Okay.
I've told you before, that's why I got kicked out of the care review panel. But 6 months later, placement ended. Placement was over, and there was huge allegations of abuse.
Mm-hmm.
Of course there would be, because you've got an assessor going in there who's supposed to be reviewing the placement, making sure it's meeting the needs of the children, who's being swayed by
The mask.
the mask. Yeah, I was trying to think of a word that without swearing, but then wasn't smart enough to see through that mask. And then I'm presenting this whole new process to this organisation who thought, no way, we're not doing that. So I think that was a bit off topic.
Well, it makes me think that you value children's voices and their right to participate.
Absolutely.
So how do you decide what weight you put on their voice?
I think that's a really hard question to answer because I think that depends so much on so many different factors.
What does it depend on?
Age, placement status, cognitive as well as chronological age, overall kind of development, what their history has been, particularly in terms of child abuse, but also attachment dysregulation, what this placement actually means for them. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think all that factors into how open they are going to be able to be honest about, their opinion.
So how do you...
I know, it's tricky, isn't it?
Yeah, how do you, I guess, rationalize but then also enact a child's right to participate if they've got a constant stream of different caseworkers or and assessors coming in to do an assessment, and part of it is talk to the child and find out the child's views. And
I guess that's why you actually need to know the child's history. And I think as an external person, if I go in and do a care review, most of the time I say I do not want to talk to the child because I think it's not okay for me, this stranger that they know is coming into a placement, to then sit them down and go, tell me what this placement is like. Tell me what it's like living here. What's it like living with mum? What's it like living with dad? Do you know what I mean? It's okay, it's not fair. When that information should be gained by the caseworker who hopefully has a better relationship, or if it's not the caseworker, by somebody else who hopefully the child has a better relationship with. So that's another factor, I think, is that relationship stuff. Who does this child actually trust? Is there anybody? And if there isn't anybody, then that's really sad. And how do you change that? Because this child needs to actually be able to develop some trust in a adult of some sort.
So there's no easy quick fix, is what I'm hearing. There's no simple solution to
no, but
how you do it.
And I think there shouldn't be either, because I think all of these factors, the factors I just listed off, and that was just, like a bit of a brain dump. I'm sure there's a lot more that I hadn't even thought of just right now. They all need to be considered because they're all considerations in the ability for this child to actually be able to verbally discuss their placement.
So I think, because the question was, what strategies are employed to ensure a child has a meaningful voice and is actively involved in decisions? I think the one thing that I heard as a strategy was having a relationship with the child.
Well, I don't think that's the only useful thing I said when I was carried on for like 10 minutes.
Strategy, because you talked about other practice, I guess, practice areas. So, knowing the history of the child and understanding the child in context. So whilst I wouldn't say I'm discounting them, but as a strategy for people listening, relationship is kind of the foundation for where you would start.
Well, no. See, for me, the foundation of where I would start is by understanding that child's story. So the strategy would be to actually read about that child and understand their story whilst building a relationship.
Okay.
I think it always goes back to that for me. How do you work with people if you don't actually know what's happened? And you have to have an over-reliance on them telling you what's happened.
You had to know. It's really hard when you get referrals often where they don't give you any information. It's like, what?
Yeah, it's too hard. And the expectations placed particularly on children and young people who have lived through some shit, because otherwise why would they be seeing us?
Yeah.
Then to then have to make them the narrators of all that trauma, it's just not okay.
Yeah.
It's not okay.
I guess we have lots of examples of where professionals have decided that a child's voice is, or the weight, I guess, they've got to put on a child's voice is extreme, given their history, their age, their cognitive abilities, and the relationships with whom they have, that they've told what they want to. And I guess an example I think about often is when children say they want to be returned to a mother or father where it's unsafe, or they want to have, daily contact if they're in long-term out-of-home care, or they want to have no contact. And I always struggle when you're involved in, a care team for a child and people too easily want to put all of the decision-making onto a child.
Yeah.
Or not at all hear the child's voice. It's like this really opposite ends of the continuum. And sometimes I'm like, can't we just be sensible? Maybe do the strategies you've talked about, knowing the child's history, having a relationship, and sit somewhere in the middle, as opposed to, well, the child said they don't want to have contact with dad, so we're stopping it. And, years go by and dad and the child never get to have a relationship because when the child was 7, they said, I don't want to see dad.
And that happens so often, doesn't it?
All the time.
So often. And it's just unfair. It's unfair to both of those parties, but particularly unfair to a child, because then how do they internalize that in years to come?
Yeah. And possibly the rest of the years of their life.
Yeah.
Because when, relationships are severed or that badly strained for so long based on the voice of a 7-year-old, that 7-year-old grows.
Yeah.
I just think it's devastating.
It is devastating. It really is. Instead of thinking, or not even just thinking, but having a conversation about, I really hear you. I really hear what you're saying. Can we think about why you might be saying that? Can we think about what might be going on for you?
Yeah.
Can we think about ways that we can make this maybe safer for you so that you can still see dad?
Yeah.
Maybe we can think about there being some phone calls or some video calls or some letter writing or perhaps if it's face-to-face, maybe make it look a bit different. Do you know what I mean? There's always other ways to explore what that child might be saying instead of full stop, yep, get it, I've heard you. We're going to then enact everything that you've actually said.
Yeah. Thank you, 7-year-old, for your voice.
Thank you. Thank you for telling us exactly what we should be and shouldn't be doing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not okay. Not okay.
Yeah. And, it's just an area I wish we could have some more common ground on as a profession and have different or deeper conversations around child participation.
Well, I think you said it before. It's like this pendulum. It's like children have no voice or they have all the voice. And either one of those ends of that pendulum, it's actually not okay because that's not real life.
No, it's not.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
In real life, a 7-year-old can't actually direct every decision that's made about them because they're 7. Yep. But in real life, they also need to have a say about some things, but it should be developmentally sound.
Yes. When I worked in a youth detention centre years and years ago, rights, it was, back in the day where there wasn't a glossy brochure when you were admitted into the detention centre. Here are your rights, and that process started while I was working with there. So part of the admission process was ensuring the young person were aware of their rights in the detention centre. And I mean, it sparked many a colourful conversation with the staff at the time about these young offenders coming to incarceration, and we're going to actively tell them what their rights are. And I can laugh now, but I remember being horrified at some of the values, I guess, that came out in staff's opinions about young people knowing their rights when they were getting incarcerated. And I did a lot of admissions work. So I did lots of conversations with the young boys about what their rights were in custody. And I'll never forget this other staff member who was brilliant in many, many ways. But he'd say to me, and are you having a conversation about their responsibilities, Rose? Because you can't have rights without responsibilities.
Okay.
And he said that maybe 3 months into this new process. And I was like, it's actually not anything that had come down from head office to talk about. And I thought, how do I actually have a conversation? Here are your rights, but here are also your responsibilities, because like you were saying, that is true life. You know, you have the right in Australia, at least, to have free speech, but that doesn't mean that your speech is free of consequences.
That's right, yeah.
So we need to make sure when we talk to people about their rights, so they actually also understand what is my responsibility. And so I struggled in that particular aspect of the role to then have the conversation about responsibilities, especially because it wasn't on any glossy brochure. I couldn't tick my box on the admission form that we talked about responsibilities, but I wanted to try and talk to the boys around, here are all your rights, but here's also what it means, like you're living kind of communally. There are expectations and you do have responsibilities to actually act like a decent human being, and you know, whatever the responsibility, whatever your rights were, chances are there's a responsibility that goes with it. And that has stuck with me throughout my career. Every time I hear people talk about who's ever rights, I also think, and don't forget their responsibilities.
Yeah. What about children in care? When they have the Charter of Rights read to them, the Charter of Rights that comes from the
UN Convention, Rights of the Child, and yes, we're a signatory.
Because how many times do you hear, well, I've got two questions about that. Firstly, how many times do you hear carers go, yeah, you know, Jodie came out and told them their rights and now they're uncontrollable.
All the time.
They're uncontrollable. They've ruined this placement, blah, blah, blah. So that's kind of interesting.
It is.
But I probably only had one question. My other question is, what kind of responsibilities does a child?
I think in relation to the Charter of Rights for Children in out-of-home care in New South Wales, when I was in a role that was managing that kind of service system, I would talk to my staff around how do you embed a conversation with both carers and children around what is the role of a child and what is the role of an adult.
Yeah.
And that there will still be decisions made that are not going to sit well with you don't like, for both carers and also sometimes natural parents, birth parents, but also children. How do we have a really honest, well-rounded conversation that talks around what is everyone's roles and in that, what are the responsibilities? And just because you absolutely have the right to participate, I would ensure that we were talking to children and young people around it does not mean what you tell me you want is what's going to happen, because that's very different. Your right to hear your voice is very different to your directing who you're going to see, you know, how you're going to spend your birthday money, or you know, and I'd try and say to the caseworkers and managers, in a private home, parents make decisions all the time that their children don't like. Parents have expectations of their child. Parents have a way to discipline and punish their children. And those children still have rights, because Australia is a signatory to the UN Rights of the Child. So how do we not just go out and read this brochure? How do we do it in a way that is actually well-rounded and a child understands, I've got rights, but also there's all this other hidden stuff that's now I see, you know, like one of the rights in New South Wales, if a child is removed, they have the right to call a birth parent at their removal or soon after their removal. Absolutely do. If it's not safe though, how do we... How do we have a conversation with the child around that? You know, and have a right, if you're in care in New South Wales, you have a right to see the people you want to see. Absolutely, you have that right. How do you have the conversation with? But if it's not safe or if it's not practicable. So if someone lives in, I don't know, the Nullarbor Plain and you're in Bateman's Bay in New South Wales, how do we not set up the expectation that the child thinks they're going to travel to the Nullarbor Plain every school holidays?
So it's that stuff around, so what essentially it sounds like what you're saying is making sure it's really clear that this is a public parenting arrangement for both the child and the carer.
Yes, and just like in private homes, adults make decisions for children that they don't like. Doesn't mean your rights have been ignored or trampled on. It means because of your age, because of your history, because of whatever, a parent is making a decision. Life's that's going to be life forever. If you are in employment, your employee your employer, has expectations of you. And so I think sometimes we forget, don't know, or don't feel comfortable having a conversation about all of it. Rights, responsibilities, expectations.
Yeah. Yep. Great answer.
All right, last question.
Okay, let's do it.
Tell me, Jodie.
No, I'm going to ask you this question.
I don't know the answer.
The same. That's why I'm asking you this question. It's a great question, but I don't want to answer it first. Okay, how do these three fields, child protection, trauma, out-of-home care, intersect, and what is the single greatest systematic challenge in managing cases that span all three? Take it away, Rose.
I don't know.
It's a big one, isn't it?
It's massive.
Why do you think it's so hard for us to answer this question?
You can be practically in child protection and you don't necessarily enter out-of-home care.
Yep.
But apart from that, I think about if you're in the child protection system, and I'm talking encompassing out-of-home care, you have either been or will likely to have been abused, neglected.
Well, yeah, because, yeah, absolutely.
Otherwise, And so I think I'm challenged on if I have been abused and neglected by a parent or parents, how do I not have trauma?
Yeah.
And then how do I don't know how to articulate any of that because they intersect. That if you're in child protection and then you go into out-of-home care, from my experience, there's a whole lot of trauma for everyone that in that family, whether it's the children, grandparents, aunties, uncles, parents. There's a whole lot of trauma that comes with that.
Yep.
And so the intersection of trauma on the child protection out-of-home care system is pervasive, prevalent, and oftentimes intrusive in the work. So I think they don't intersect. It's kind of a package deal. And then the single greatest systematic challenge in managing children in that system with their trauma.
But it doesn't have to always just be children.
No, or adults, family members, you name it. Like, if you had to pick one challenge in all of that.
I mean, I think there's some challenges in terms of resources and service provision. I think that when you think about it, there's services for child protection, there's services for out-of-home care. And we make an assumption that obviously trauma, like you said before, is pervasive across both of those service systems. But if you are somebody that still lives at home, or let's think about it this way, if you are somebody, say you're 15, you no longer live at home because it's not safe for you to live at home, and you've kind of voted with your feet, and you're now this homeless 16-year-old who can't actually access housing because they're 15, can't get into a youth supported accommodation or youth refuge because there's no actual, your legal order still is with your parents. Then what happens to you? And then how do you access counselling? How do you access support? How do you access everything that, say, if you were in out-of-home care, you would be entitled to?
Well, that all depends, doesn't it? It depends on, do you sometimes go to school and is there an amazing, SSO or counsellor or teacher or nurse at the school that links you into a service that is going to be helpful and help you navigate that? Or are you that isolated and that shut down that you spend your days in a bedroom hoping the world doesn't see you because it's so scary out there? So,
but those, sorry, I cut you off. Do you want me? I'll stop.
No, go.
But I was going to say those services that you can access as a young person who's still at risk, who's experienced abuse and neglect, who's experienced child protection risk issues, but hasn't experienced a child protection intervention.
Yeah.
The services that you access, you're there with every other generalist person trying to fight for support amongst services that aren't actually funded. Whereas I sometimes think that if you are in out-of-home care, you actually can access a different pool a different pool.
I think you can access a different pool
of support.
Definitely. There's there's agencies that are only catered to children in out-of-home care. But I guess if I think about when I worked with homeless young people in the ACT, or other, organisations that weren't in the child protection out of home care area, there are service systems available to those children and young people, and they are as overstretched and under-resourced as the ones that are set up for kids in care. And I don't know that the out-of-home care system, I think is my problem, actually caters to children the way that it should, the way it says it does. And so I don't know if there's actually an advantage to being out-of-home care by way of getting into a service.
I think there's lots of pros and cons to both of those situations, because I think the main advantage to being in out-of-home care is that you can access. You should be able to access the supports that you require. But I think the main disadvantage is that sometimes you're overly pathologized, and obviously you're in out-of-home care, which brings its own set of stuff. But I think that if you are, say, a 15, 16-year-old homeless youth who's trying to navigate this world on their own without any support structures in place, it's really hard to actually get access to anything.
I agree, but I think there are kids in out-of-home care in exactly that same boat.
No, I do agree with you around that. I think, I absolutely agree with you around that. And it shouldn't be that way, should it?
No.
Because these kids have already been through enough. They should be in a safe, stable placement when their needs are being met.
Or, at the very least, their parent is the Minister of Communities and, whatever the title is now, because we keep changing the names in the letterhead. At the very least, the person that holds parental responsibility for you is a elected member of the government of New South Wales. You should actually be able to engage in the service, provision wherever you live, and not be marginalised, not catered to, or not seen because of resourcing, because bloody hell, the government's your parent. But it happens all the time.
Happens all the time. How about kids who need braces? And the response is, well, you're going to have to go put yourself on that free list. Do you know what I mean? I mean, honestly, this kid is in the care of the minister, pay for their braces.
Yeah.
It drives me insane. And that's not a mental health example, obviously, but
no, I mean,
do you know what I mean? But a kid who needs a psychiatrist and they have to be on the free list with everybody else.
Yeah.
Truly, that's just not okay.
No. Oh, you need to go to preschool. Excellent. Well, if your carers can't afford it, guess you're not going.
Yeah, I mean, that's just rubbish.
It's
rubbish. I just think that's rubbish.
I know. So the single greatest systemic challenge, are you saying, is resourcing and the service system?
Yes. I'm sure there's many more, but right now, as I'm patting Cash, Cash is the dog, that is what I'm saying.
Okay.
What would you say?
I would say right now in New South Wales, Australia, it's the alleged reform that DCJ is going through.
Love it. Yeah, I actually would say that too. Yeah, love it. Why would you say that?
Because I guess I've heard the word reform for the last 12 months and I don't see what's different. I don't see how anything's reformed, and I think recycling old practices or old, I think recycling ideas from the early 2000s, whatever it may be, that's not reform. That's not rethinking the system. That's not using all of our collective practice, wisdom, lived experience, new research. It's just reverting to old ways. And at the same time, the experience of children and young people in care in this state has not changed. The experience of carers in this state has not changed. The experience of birth parents in this state has not changed. But we can, talk about this great reform. I actually don't know what the reform is.
I think we've talked about it before so many times, haven't we? How people just use different language to describe something that has already existed or is currently existing. And then they've just put this big glossy new word on it. And suddenly we're all supposed to be, dumb enough to think, oh, it's something new.
Oh, children aren't in hotels anymore. Amazing.
Yeah, where are those children though? That's the thing. Children aren't in hotels anymore. Well, that's great. Where actually are they then?
Yeah, because there's not been an increase in the amount of foster and kinship carers in the state. So where are they? Are they at home unsafe, or are they in a hotel and it's not called the same thing anymore? You tell me.
All right. I think, Rose, that's probably enough. What do you think?
I agree, before we get on our high horse.
I mean, we do love a high horse. And maybe people listen to us because we do have some high horses at times. I don't know. Thank you for your questions, everyone. Thank you so much for sending them in.
Yeah, we really appreciate the response that we've had. What are you pointing me to? Oh, the ending. You want me to read the ending? So that brings us to the end of another episode of Relational Practice, the Social Work Podcast. We really hope today's discussion was insightful, valuable, or you got something out of it. Yeah, we hope it was valuable to your practice. To ensure you're always in the loop, please follow our podcast. Your subscription and social media engagement also helps us build our community and make these important conversations more accessible to other social workers and practitioners. So thanks for listening. Stay safe and remember to always practice relations.
But maybe, baby, some